Now, FlutterFlow is always innovating. It is always creating new features, adding new functionality, and constantly reinventing itself. Back when I started with FlutterFlow, it was a completely different product than the product that we are using now. And I'm super excited to see what the future will hold. Now, in this past year, FlutterFlow added some amazing features and some amazing functionality. And some of these features I've been waiting for a very, very long time, and I'm sure you feel the same way. And so in today's video, I want to share with you the best features that were launched this year. And I'm sure that many of these features are your own personal favorites as well. Now, before we get started, as always, all the apps and all the resources you will be able to view and or clone by becoming a member of our amazing Patreon community. And that means access to all the past apps as well as all the future apps. And to learn more about our amazing rapidly growing community, click the first link in the description below the video. And so I went ahead and created a proof of concept app that showcases the top 10 best features of this past year. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to run this app and then show you the features one by one, as well as explaining how you can implement a particular feature in your own app as well. Now, the first amazing feature that I want to share with you guys is actually a feature that was released fairly recently. And this is a feature that allows you to have amazing dragging behavior combined with animations, okay? So on this page, I have a list of some cities here. And what we can do is we can actually drag these items to the left and to the right. And we can also easily react on what the user is doing. So for instance, when I'm dragging, this thing is moving to the left. If I drag it to the right, it moves to the right. But if I let go, it resets. It comes back. And so you can utilize this feature to do all kinds of amazing things. One being a classic, which is where you delete the item if you drag it to the left, for instance, or maybe you make it a favorite when you drag it to the right. Okay. And so the way this is implemented is if we come back to the app, the first thing that you need to do is you need to make sure that this specific item here, right, that's part of the list view, this top item is actually a component. And then if you go to the component, you can create all kinds of interesting things. So here we have on this card level, we have a animation here on the action trigger, which means this is a manually triggered animation. Okay, you need to trigger it yourself. And then what we have here is we have the actual animation. Okay, so if you come over here, we have two animations. We have drag update and drag end. Drag update tracks as the item is moving while the user is dragging, meaning while they have the cursor down. And then when they let go, we have this drag end. And so on drag update, we are triggering this animation and we're also updating the offset, right? We need to track where the item is. Is it, you know, to the left? Where exactly to the left? Is it being dragged to the right? Where exactly to the right? And on drag end, all we're doing is we are reversing the animation. We're basically putting the particular widget back to where it was originally when the page was loaded. And that's, you know, in the default state. And we're also resetting this offset, right? Because now it's neither to the left, neither to the right. So we need to make sure that it is reset. And so what you can do potentially is you can implement logic that decides, well, how far was this item dragged? Was it dragged like really to the left or really to the right, right? You can ignore the little drags, right? The little drag to the left or the little drag to the right. And you can kind of decide what you want to do with it. This is a very, very powerful technique because it takes advantage of some of the new triggers that FlutterFlow released and gave us the ability to track, okay? And speaking of new triggers, this is my second amazing feature, and that is the fact that we are now given this something called a gesture detector that has a lot of triggers, a lot of callbacks, okay? And so one example was in the previous feature where we can drag, you know, we have this dragging behavior. We also have, you know, vertical dragging behavior. We have like over 50 new triggers that allow you to take advantage and make your apps a lot more dynamic. And so one quick example here is I have here a button in a container. And so if I press the button, nothing happens. But if I press it and hold it, we have this forced press, right? So if I hold it, we have a forced press start. If I let go, we have a forced press end. And this is obviously just scraping the top of the surface, right? You have lots and lots of other callbacks, right? So if we go back here and we go to this example here, we have this on the card level. If we go over here, we open this up, we have this on long press start, on long press end. And if you click here, you have so many other callbacks, right? And so if I type long, we have, in addition to these two events, we have on long press, on long press cancel, on tertiary long press, on secondary long press. And, you know, if you remove that, you have so many other events, right? You have on panning, on scaling, on secondary, right? You have so many other things. And what this all means is that if you want to, you know, track if the user is clicking, that's easy to do. But if you want to track if they're long pressing, if there's, you know, there's a secondary event, if they're panning it, if they're trying to pan it, they're trying to scale it, you can do all that. You can hook into those events that FlutterFlow is now making your app aware of, right? And so you can do a lot of interesting things, make your app a lot more dynamic. And so this was a big, big feature that opens up a ton of new possibilities. Now, the next feature that I want to share with you guys is drag and drop functionality. And this is actually a feature that I've been waiting for a very, very long time, because you can easily do drag and drop with Flutter, which is what FlutterFlow is based on. And that means you can create really awesome apps, like think about like a Trello app where you can drag different items in different columns. You can build all kinds of interesting like business apps, calendar apps where you're dragging different events. And when you drag it to a different day, that automatically, you know, registers as part of that day, maybe that event. And so here, what you can do is you can drag this. And if you drag it inside this white area, it tells you entered zone. If I drag out, it tells me exited zone. If I drag it and I let go, it tells me accepted. Okay. And so what this means is that you can turn any widget into either a draggable, which means something can be dragged, and you can also turn any widget into something that's going to accept your event. Because the thing is, you don't want all the widget to allow other widgets to come in, right? If I have other widgets here, and it doesn't really make sense for, you know, me to drag a widget there, then it should not be, you know, a drag target. And so the way you implement this, if you go back here, and what you want to do is actually very, very simple. You choose a widget and you wrap it in either a draggable or a drag target. So this becomes a draggable, this becomes wrapped, this whole container, in a drag target. And then what you're doing is on this drag target, you can listen for all kinds of events, right? So if you go back here, we have undrag enter, undrag accept, undrag exit. And most importantly, when you have that widget being dragged, that widget can send information, right? Because potentially, you know, you're not going to have one widget that is going to be draggable. You're going to have all the widgets, maybe in a calendar, all the events are going to be draggable. So you want to know, what is that widget about, right? What kind of information is it holding? And so you can do that as well, because when you come over here and you go into draggable, you can specify a type, but you can also specify a value. Okay, so this makes it really, really awesome. And this means you're pretty much guaranteed to create any kind of app that leverages drag and drop functionality. It's all there. It's all waiting for you to go out and build this app. You have all this capability. You have all this functionality that allows you to do just that. And I think this is really, really awesome. And I'm so happy that FlutterFlow went ahead and gave us this functionality, because this is an important piece of functionality for creating all kinds of interactive apps. Now, the next feature that I want to share with you is an awesome, extremely powerful feature that I don't feel gets the love that it deserves. And this is parallel tasks, okay? And so typically when you're building an app, chances are your tasks are executing sequentially, right? Let's say you have an action and you're calling an API and you're waiting for the result, and then you're doing something else. Maybe you're writing to a database, maybe you're displaying, and then you may call another API and do the exact same thing. Well, did you know that you can actually execute tasks in parallel, right? You can actually run them at the same time, simultaneously, instead of consecutively, get all the data and then do something with that data, right? So in this example here, what we have is, if we come back to this page, we have 6 widgets here, and they all run simultaneously, right? They run at the exact same time. And as you can see, the idea here is that we're basically fetching a specific country here, right? We have a list of countries, and we're fetching, country number 2, number 3, 4, 5, 6, etc., in this example. And in this kind of specific example, we definitely want to do it simultaneously, right? So think about a dashboard with a bunch of widgets, right? The user loads the dashboard. We want that data, those widgets that are going to be displaying that data, we want them to be loaded simultaneously. We don't want them to be loaded sequentially, right? One after the other. We want them to be loaded simultaneously. And so if we go back here, let me show you how this is done. So first, we have this grid view, right? And so if we come over here, you can see that we're basically cycling over results, right? And so what is results? Well, if we go to our page state here, which is what results is basically a list of strings. And so when this app loads, it doesn't really know how many items are going to be there. You can have 3 items, you can have 30 items, you can have 300 items. But what happens here is that when this app loads, we have this action here. And the purpose of this action is to get the data and put this data into that list, into that array. And in our example here, let me go ahead and zoom out so that you can see it. We have this parallel action block, right? This is this parallel action that you can easily click here and add it. It's a specific type of action. You don't add an action, you need to add a parallel action. And that below it, you basically add the actions that you want to see executed in parallel, right? So I went ahead and added 6 actions, and these are just API calls that get a specific country from a list, right? So we have an API call that gives us a list of countries, and I'm saying like, well, get us a list of countries, but I'm only interested in country 1, 2, 3, depending on the API call. And so what I have is 6 calls, and they all get the data. And once we get the list of countries, we take a specific country and we add it to the list, okay? And so here we might add, add country 1, country 2, country 3, 4, etc., etc. And as a result, we get a list of 6 countries because we had 6 simultaneous parallel API calls that each got a specific country. And as a result, we have 6 items in this list. And that is why you see this list generate dynamic results, right? If we had 10 parallel API calls, you would have seen 10 countries here, okay? And so this is a must-have, absolutely a must-use feature if you need to display data all at once, right? Typically, I mean, generally speaking, if you have one API call, you're not going to have parallel stuff because it's just one API call, right? Or maybe you have an API call that depends on another API call. That's not parallel, right? Then you need to do it sequentially. But if you need to display separate data that does not depend on each other, right? That does not depend on the previous call, then you definitely want to look at parallel tasks. It's a very, very powerful and very, in-demand feature. Now, the next feature that I want to show you is a streaming API support. And this was also a long-awaited feature because with the advent of ChatGPT and other AI APIs, you can actually get results in a streaming fashion. And to show you how this works, I'm going to go ahead and run one of my other apps that I built that showcases this. So now here's our app, and this app talks to Claude 3.5 Sonnet, which is a popular ChatGPT competitor. So we have the standard interface, but we also have the interface that takes advantage of the streaming APIs. And so if I ask it something like, what's the meaning of life? Do it in a streaming kind of behavior, right? So it's as soon as it knows the next kind of token or the next word, it's going to output it, right? Whereas if I come here and I say something like list 10 European cities, it's not going to be streaming, right? It's going to actually wait, make us wait and then output it all at the same time. And so this was actually made possible when FlutterFlow introduced their support for streaming APIs. Before that, it was very, very difficult to do, and you actually had to create lots and lots of custom code, which is exactly what I did in some of the previous apps before this functionality was introduced. Now, if we go back to this app, the way that this is implemented is you want to have your streaming here. And if you come to advanced settings, you want to turn on streaming, right? So process streaming response, you want it to be set to true. And then when you actually execute that API call, so when the user hits send, for example, you want to send that query to the LLM, what you're going to be doing is you are going to have access to a bunch of callbacks, right? So you have this on message. So when you get a new token or a new message back, you also have on error and on close. And so here I'm basically listening for on message, right? So if I open this up, we have some code here. We have an action flow that basically takes that new message and appends it to our page state, right? So we are listening, we get a new message, we append it to page state. And then in this list view, we basically, display stuff from the page state, right? So we have this page state here that we're listening, or app state as the case may be. And as we're getting new messages, as we're getting new tokens, this is automatically going to be updated, right? Because, this is state basically, right? Anytime you modify state, you're going to be, rebuilding the page. That's one of the nice things about using state. And so what's cool about this is that you have access to data that is being outputted before you got, the entire answer. And that wasn't the case before. You actually had to wait for the entire answer. And now you can display this really, really nice streaming behavior, which obviously increases the user satisfaction, right? It makes the app super easy to use. The user is getting data in real time, and they can see that the app actually is trying to get an answer to their question, to their query, right? So this is highly, highly recommended if you're dealing with an API that supports streaming. Definitely make sure that you're using this. The next feature that I want to share with you is another feature that's definitely punching above its weight. And if I had to guess, lots of people are not using it, and maybe many of these people are not even aware that this feature exists. And this is API interceptors, okay? And the idea here is that you can control the data that is being sent to the API as well as the response before either the other server gets your request or before you get back a response. And this is very, very important because it gives you lots of flexibility, it gives you lots of power to modify your requests or modify the responses in ways that you can't really do with FlutterFlow. Okay, so let me give you an example. So I have here a button here that when you click it, it sends an API call to a server that I have set up, whose job it is to basically output the headers that we are sending, okay? And so now if we modify the headers, if we change the headers, we will be able to see the headers that the end server, the actual, the server on the other side that's listening gets, okay? So if I click here, send a request, I get back a response, which is the exact headers that I've just sent. And as you can see, these are all standard headers. We have accept encoding. These are all standard headers. But there are some headers that are unique because these are the headers that we've sent manually. Okay, so there are two headers here that you will typically never see because these are custom headers. The first one is header 1, which is test. And the second one is header 2, which is test 2. And these are the headers that I actually added manually. Okay. And so if we go back to our app over here and we go back to this example here, and if we click here, you can see that I'm executing this API call over here, this API interceptor test. And if we go back here, you can see that this is my API call, okay? And I can obviously add headers here, but there are some situations where, you want to modify the request and, it needs to be dynamic, right? So for instance, I cannot add a dynamic header here. I can add a static header here. I can add as many as I want, but I cannot make it dynamic. I cannot, look up from page state. And let's say I need to add a dynamic header. I can't do it. And so I need to do it using this interceptor. And so the way this is done is you go to advanced settings and you have this API interceptors, right? If you hover over, you can read more about it. Define or add one or more interceptors to modify the request, etc., etc. So what we have is we have this example interceptor, and this is actually configured as a custom code action. So if we come over here, we have this interceptor, and here you're modifying the request. Here you're modifying the response. So what I did here is I modified the request by adding two headers, right? Header one is test, header two is test two, and these headers are going to be part of the request, right? We're modifying the request before we actually send it. Obviously, it makes sense because it wouldn't make sense to modify it after we've sent it. And here we're modifying the response after we've gotten it, but before we made it available to the app. So here you can also modify something. And this is obviously going to be useful in some situations, right? You're not going to be using this all the time. But like I said, this gives you the flexibility that you didn't have before. Okay, so if you want to create like custom headers with like data from app state or some other state or some other variables, you can do that now. But that's just the beginning, right? You can modify the body, you can modify anything. And so this specific feature can be useful in some edge cases where you must modify the request or must modify the response. Okay, like I said, you may not be using it in every single app, but it's important that you realize that this feature exists, because I'm sure there's going to be a specific use case where you need to leverage this feature. The next feature that I want to share you is another long-awaited feature for those who use Supabase as their app's backend. And because I absolutely love Supabase and I use it in pretty much all my apps, this was a very, very welcome feature. And what this particular feature allows you to do is it allows you to do real time with Supabase. So here I have a little form where I can add a user as a record to a table that I have set up. And all I need to do is add this user, and this list of users is going to be refreshed automatically. I don't need to refresh it manually or anything like that. So for instance, let's say I want to add another user. This is Mike, and Mike lives in San Diego. Okay, so all I need to do is click add user, and we see the user displayed automatically, right? Let's go ahead and add another user. So let's say this is Rob, and Rob lives in Miami. Okay, I add another user, and that user is right here. Okay, and so how is this done? Well, if we go back here and we check out this example over here, what we have here is we have a list view that displays the data from Supabase, right? So we have this specific table that we're displaying. So if we edit this, what we have here is we have another checkbox here, right? Another option. And it says here single time query. And what this means is that by default, it's not going to be checked because this is not a single time query. This is a query that we want to automatically refresh as our customer is adding new users, right? This is not going to be a single time query. This is going to be a multiple time query, right? We don't really know, but it could be more than once, right? If you don't care about this real-time functionality, you just want to display the data once and be done with it because you are sure that the data is not going to be modified, or you don't really care in terms of displaying new data, in terms of refreshing the data, then you can simply have it like this, and then it's just going to display the data that you already have. But if you have a situation, you have a list, and you're modifying the list, or somebody else is modifying the list, and it's important for you to display fresh data, right, in dashboards, CRM apps, all kinds of apps where the data is in flux. It's flexible. It could be modified by the same user on the same screen, or it could be modified by another user. So it's always important for you to have fresh data. Then you're gonna be using this default, which is not checked. Okay, and this will allow you to have fresh data automatically being displayed from your Supabase database, right? And this was already working with Firebase Firestore before, and now it is working with Supabase. So another great feature for those of us who use Supabase as our backend, like myself. The next awesome feature that was actually fairly recently introduced is the libraries functionality, okay? And so what this allows you to do is it allows you to package the app that you're building into reusable components that you can easily reuse in your future apps, okay? So as an example, here I have a sample custom widget. This is not a FlutterFlow standard widget. This is a custom widget that simply outputs some text in red. Okay, so if you come back over here, you can see that I have this custom widget. And if you come back over here, you can see this custom widget over here. Now, what we can do here is we can come over here to our FlutterFlow command palette. You can get there by pressing Command K or Control K. And you want to type library, right? And then what you want to do is you want to publish as a library. Okay, so when you come over here, you can publish this specific app as a library, which means that all the stuff that it has, custom functions, custom widgets, custom actions, they can be easily reused in your other projects. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and create a new version, let's say version 1.0, and I'm going to add a description, add a custom widget. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to commit changes and publish. Okay, so I'm going to create a commit message. I'm going to press commit. Okay, that's going to go ahead and commit my changes. Okay, and so here it's asking me to confirm my project. I'm going to come over here. I'm going to type it. And now it went ahead and added my project over here. Okay, so if I go to another app, let's say I have an app here. And what I want to do here is I want to type library and I want to go into project dependencies, right? In fact, type dependencies over here. And what I can do is I can add a library now. So if I click add a library, I have a list of libraries. Okay, so this was my other app. I can add it over here. And once I select it, I see all the stuff that's available, like city list. I have my app states, I have my data types, I have my components, my custom widget, right? So here I have a custom widget. I have all the extra stuff that I can use, right? In these formats, right? App state, data types, custom widgets. So let's say I want to use a custom widget. All I need to do is come back over here and I can go to this page and I can add another custom widget, right? I can come over here and I have my custom widget, right? My custom widget here. And I have two things that I can add, right? Because this is these are components and custom widgets imported from library projects, right? This is a new feature, and I can add this custom widget here, some text, right? And so this is awesome when you're building apps and you're also building some components that you foresee reusing in future apps or making them available to others. This is really, really cool because typically we build apps and we also build components. And what happens is you build lots of apps and you tend to rebuild those components instead of reusing them. So we're constantly reinventing the wheel, so to speak. And this helps you to limit that. And so that you have all of these reusable components. And that way you can focus on your app, you can focus on the bottom line and build the best features that you can without constantly rebuilding stuff that you've built before. My next favorite feature is custom authentication. Now, this feature, I believe, was actually launched at the end of the previous year. So it wasn't even launched this year. But this is such an awesome feature that I had to include it. And so if you're not familiar with custom authentication allows you to use pretty much any backend for your authentication needs. And so as an example, here we have an app and I'm actually authenticated, not using Supabase, not using Firebase. I'm actually authenticated via a custom backend. And so just to show you how this works, I'm going to go ahead and log out. And now it's asking me to log back in. So remember, we're not using Firebase, we're not using Supabase, we're using something else completely. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and log in using a sample account. And when I hit login, I have successfully logged in. I entered the right username and password. The system compared it. They decided that I have the right credentials. And we are back in the app. And on this page, we're displaying some user information. Okay, so how exactly does this work? Well, if we go back here, we have our screen over here, but in order to kind of get inside, you need to be authenticated, right? So how does this all work? Well, the first thing that you need to do is you need to come back to your command palette and you want to type authentication, right? When you do that, you're going to be here. You want to make sure that you have custom selected, right? You can use You can select Firebase or Superbase. You want to select custom, and you want to just, configure this, right? Entry page and logged in page, all of that. And the next thing that you need to do is you need to configure your authentication. So the user by default is going to be shown this logged in page. And so what happens when they click login is up to you, right? You define how this authentication works. And so the way that I have it set up is when you go into login over here and you open this up, we basically do a backend call somewhere. It's up to you what you want to do. And depending on that backend call, we either log in the user by specifying the specific, the data that we're getting back, an access token, a refresh token, the user ID. We can also set user data with some of the other things. Or if it did not succeed, right, we're gonna, show the user failed, okay? And this backend, it's up to you how you want to do it. I'm actually using a dummy service, right? This dummyjson.com auth login. And what I'm doing is I'm passing in the username and password. So if you come over here, if you pass this particular information, it's going to be a success, right? If you pass something else, you're going to fail, invalid credentials. You're also getting an incorrect status. And so that way, you can check in your app, okay, this was successful, log them in. FlutterFlow doesn't care what you do. You can log them in immediately. You can never log them in. FlutterFlow doesn't care. FlutterFlow gives you the option to decide when the user should be logged in. And this is really, really scary at first, but really, really awesome because you can decide, what does it mean to log in, right? You can make an API call. You can connect to your Superbase. You can ask me, should the user be logged in? You can ask your friend, right? You have so many options, and it's really up to you how you're going to be doing. Having said that, I think a very common situation is going to be using some third-party backend. There's lots and lots of third-party backend. One third-party backend called Xano comes to mind. That is something that I talked about on this channel before, and that is another backend. And that is a backend that you can easily connect here. But that's just one example. There's so many other backends that you can use if you do not want to use Superbase or Firebase. And this is an awesome, awesome feature that I made sure that I included in this review because it increases the flexibility of your app so much. So now you're not limited to those two. You can use anything that you want. And this makes your app a lot more flexible. Last but definitely not least, another awesome feature that I want to highlight is local run. And this allows you to take the app and run it on a local simulator. Okay, you run it locally on your own computer. So the way this works is that you can simply click here and you have this FlutterFlow local run. And in my case, it's telling me that I need to download the FlutterFlow desktop app to run your app on local device. And this is true. You can't run it locally by using this web interface, which is what I typically end up using. And so what you want to do is you want to download the FlutterFlow desktop app, and then it's going to be super easy to run your app locally. Failing that, if you're someone like me who tends to use FlutterFlow via the web interface, you can easily run it on your computer as well by clicking here and copying this and pasting it in your terminal and then running it using something like Visual Studio Code or Android Studio or your IDE of choice. And so I did just that. I downloaded this entire app on my local computer and I ended up running it in an iPhone 15 Pro Max simulator. And this is the app over here, which is the exact app that you're going to see once you use local run to run it on an Android simulator, on a iPhone simulator, an iPad simulator, whatever you want. You're going to be seeing it here, except my method takes extra steps. Local run is completely integrated, right? So if you download the desktop version, you will never have to deal with any of that. It's going to do everything for you, which I think is absolutely revolutionary because at the end of the day, we need to run this app on a device, right? Maybe an iOS device, an Android device, maybe on both platforms, or maybe on the web, or maybe on somewhere else. And we want to make sure we test it out correctly, right? Especially if we are going to be testing it on devices. Because the fact of the matter is, it's not enough to test your app here on FlutterFlow. You need to make sure that it runs on a simulator. And if it runs on a simulator, it's definitely 99.99% gonna run on a real device. And so this is very, very important. And a local run makes this whole process a lot more seamless. And so this is an amazing feature. And I'm actually amazed personally that they were able to pull it off and it works so seamlessly, because I never thought that it's going to work right inside. It's all going to be automatic. It truly is automatic. I thought that you'd always need to download this code, run it in Visual Studio Code or Android Studio, set up all your simulators manually, do all that. But it's actually very, very seamless. So kudos to the FlutterFlow team for getting it to work, because this is really, really awesome. And so you can develop your app here in FlutterFlow, test it out, and also test it out on your local machine in a simulator to make sure that it absolutely does work. Not only an awesome feature, but a must-have feature that you absolutely should be using while developing and testing your app. Now, the reason I built this proof of concept app is to first showcase the features that I absolutely love, my favorite features of last year and even beyond, and also to give you an app that does lots of things at the same time, right? So we have these 10 features here, we have 10 pages here, and they do all kinds of interesting things. And so this app is actually going to be very, very useful to somebody that's either starting out with FlutterFlow, maybe beginner, intermediate, or maybe someone that has been doing FlutterFlow for quite a while, but is interested in leveraging some of these other features. And so when you join our amazing Patreon community, you'll be able to view this app right here. So you'll be able to get access to 10 of these features immediately. And not only that, you'll be able to clone this app on your own computer and see how all of this is implemented. And so I built lots of apps on this channel, but I would say an app like this is going to be even more valuable. It's going to be super valuable because it exposes you to my 10 favorite features, and features that chances are you're going to be using in your app. And so you'll be able to view and or clone this app as a member of our amazing Patreon community. And not only that, but you also get access to all my previous apps. You'll get access to an amazing community where everybody is super eager and super dedicated to, learn code and learn FlutterFlow and learn a bunch of other tools. And we're always helping each other. And I'm also trying my best and answering questions if I can add value. And plus, in addition to that, you're going to get access to my weekly no code video podcast, where I basically share tips and tricks and talk about different things that I'm working on, things that I'm planning to work on, things that I'm thinking about working. I'm also getting your feedback. And so if you're looking for more content, you're looking for content that's above and beyond to the content that you're getting here on YouTube, then you definitely need to join our amazing Patreon community and become a member, because you're going to be getting more stuff, access to all the apps, and above and beyond, you're going to be supporting this channel and supporting my work, and that is greatly, greatly appreciated. So if this sounds like something that you enjoy, you've gotten value here, some of the features that you're planning to use in your app, in your future apps, or maybe in your current apps, then definitely hit the first link in the description and become a member today.